My name is Olga Peters, and I will be moderating today's panel with our select board candidates. I just wanted to have a quick show of hands. At this point, does anyone have questions that they're hoping to ask? And then, of course, if you come up with more questions, we will have time for that as well. But it just gives me an idea. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Maybe we'll be here soon.
Everybody ready? Candidates?
Yes.
Sure.
I said, sure, let's test though.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Tim.
Sorry. Trying to get Daniel here, but.
Yes.
I do have one question, whether there's anybody who's already in it and running again versus new.
Yes. So, Tim, you're one incumbent, right, Tim?
Yes, I'm your lone incumbent.
And you are running for the 3-year seat.
I am running for the 3-year seat. Kate O'Connor, who's currently our chair, is leaving her 3-year seat. So what I'm attempting to do with the will of the voters is to move from my 1-year seat to the 3-year, because I can now make that commitment. So
You're going to have to talk up a little bit.
Sure, I'm the only serving select board member here.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for being here today for this panel discussion. The structure for today, I'm going to start with an opening question for all the candidates. I'm going to keep it pretty easy just to warm them up. And then I believe some of the candidates have some questions for each other. And if they don't, I have more questions. So we're going to have a little bit of not debate, but a chance for the candidates to kind of ask each other questions and see where they all stand on issues. Then we will turn it over to question and answer. And if anyone has any needs in the meantime, just let me know. And let's get started. We're going to start down this end with Elizabeth McLoughlin. Welcome, Elizabeth. So the question I want to start everyone off with is, why are you running for select board now? What about now is the reason to run?
Well, I'm running for select board because I have a certain amount of experience in town committees and a certain amount of experience in my business that I think would be useful to the town. I'm running now because I was encouraged to run because there was a need for people to run and serve the community in this way. I don't have any particular issue that I'm running for. I'm running on the basis of good government and hoping that my judgment would serve the town with being on the select board.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And you're running for the 1-year seat.
I'm running for the 1-year seat.
Tim Wessel, our one incumbent who is hoping to move from the 1-year to the 3-year seat.
Yes.
Why now?
I apologize for fiddling with my phone. It's the rudest thing, but I'm trying to get fellow candidate Daniel on board, and I think he's here, so I'm not sure how we'll handle that. Can you hear us, Daniel?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Okay. So I'm Tim Wessel. You can hear me okay? Fine. He's good.
Both of you.
I think in short, I feel that I've been doing a pretty good job on the select board. I really enjoy the work, and I'd like to continue doing the work for the people of Brattleboro. I think I'll leave more time for everyone else because I'm the only candidate here.
Thank you. Mr. Heller, you are also running for the 1-year seat.
Yes.
And what made you choose to run now?
Well, I was also encouraged to run by Kate O'Connor, who's now here to yell at me about supporting the 1% sales tax. But we'll do that a little later. The reason I'm running now is because I've been talking to a lot of people over the last couple months, and also as chair of the Energy Committee, I talked to a lot of people. And one of the big concerns people talk about is that not as many young people are moving to Brattleboro, young families, new businesses. And I think there's a big question for Brattleboro right now about how it's going to move forward for the next you know, if you look ahead 30 years, what does the economy of Brattleboro look like? What does the main street of Brattleboro look like? Is it exactly the same as it is now? Are there new ideas, new changes we need to make? And I just think it's important to have someone with my perspective as someone who moved here 5 years ago, as someone who started his own business, who's involved with town politics. I just think I'll bring a valuable perspective to the select board.
Thank you, Oscar. Franz Reichsman, hello. You are also running for the one-year seat,
That's correct.
and I know you currently sit on the representative town meeting. But I'm wondering why you want to make the jump from there to select board now.
As well, you might wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am a representative, town meeting representative, and for 4 years I've been the chair of the representative town meeting finance committee. So I've reviewed a lot of budgets and been to a lot of select board meetings as well as school board meetings.
Finance committee.
Why am I running now? That's a little more difficult. It's sort of two reasons, I think. One is that, speaking honestly, I was at a select board meeting not too long ago, and I found myself upset with the way the meeting was going and also with the way the decision was made. And I thought, you know, this could have been done a lot better. And it made me think that maybe I had a role on the board. I was also at the same time worried that there were some open seats and would there be good candidates. It turns out I didn't have to worry about that because there are good candidates other than myself. But it got me thinking, you know, about what it would be like to have sort of a role where I would talk to people, hear from people, maybe play a part in increasing involvement in town affairs, things like that. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, this is something I'd really like to do. And I do think with my background in the finance committee, I had an understanding of some of the important issues and an ability to communicate those things to a wider audience that I hope would draw people into the process of participating in town government and town affairs.
Thank you, Franz. And Ricky Rizzotti, am I saying that correctly?
You got me again.
Ricky, you are a writing candidate, and I'm wondering why running for select board now and why as a writer?
So when I first started trying to move to Brattleboro 2 years ago, people told me in my budget that was going to take me 2 years, and they were right until I could find affordable housing here. And now that I've settled in kind of over the last 6 months, kind of because I couldn't afford my rent this month, so I'm at risk of being evicted. At least I've been able the last 6 months to go to the select board meetings and see what's going on politically here. And I'm running for, as a write-in, both the 1 and 3 year seats. And I'm just not impressed by the incumbents or the other running candidates. So I'm really encouraging more people to become write-ins and for the political advocacy to become more accessible by having the positions be paid, so we're not just relying on people who are financially comfortable enough to be able to volunteer. And I think that the paid positions will also solicit the most qualified people to come, because right now corporations are much more powerful than the government because the best people are working for corporations. I'm running because I want to protect and progress life quality in the ways that I'm not seeing other people care about, at least that are participating in these roles. And also that I want to increase the voter accessibility to include people who work in Brattleboro. Because of the gentrification here, they can't afford to live here, but they want to, and There's not a lot of job opportunities in the smaller towns outside of here, and they deserve a voice in government.
Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, we do have a tiny.
I was going to
Daniel.
ask, we're going to try to hear from Daniel Quip, who is on Facebook or Skype right now, but we don't know if we can hear you, Daniel.
Well, I can hear you all just fine. Maybe Alan, you can get a thumbs up.
Is there a tiny more volume?
Sorry. But I can do this, which is a trick I learned.
You can put it in Oscar's coffee cup.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do your best, Daniel.
Okay, all right. Well, so I think the question that I heard is, why are you running? Why now? So I've been involved in grassroots politics in Brattleboro for the last few years. I've been a town meeting member for just a year. I became a citizen a couple of years back, which was my first opportunity to do that. And this year I decided to run for Selectboard because I wanted to make sure that there was a number of candidates for voters to choose from. I was concerned that there would be an uncontested election, which is bad for our democracy. And as people have already said, there are a number of really great candidates for these seats, and I would like to think that I am one of those candidates that would be worth your vote. I grew up in a low-income household with a single mother, experienced the challenges of getting by on limited income, and I want to be on the board as a voice for folks that are experiencing difficulties of getting by in Brattleboro. I think that people on the board, such as Randy, David, Tim, Shanta, have already been there to speak for, well, not speak for, but to speak with and bring the experiences of folks that are struggling to town government. But it requires a lot of energy and privilege in order to be able to get to those Tuesday evening meetings. So I want to make sure that there are folks on the board who are connected with those that find life a struggle in Brattleboro right now. I'm working at SEDCA currently, this is my office, and I'm doing fuel assistance, and every day I'm working with clients in Wyndham County that are facing really hard choices between what to do with fixed income dollars like Social Security or low income dollars from their jobs and trying to keep their homes heated. And I know that it's a real challenge, so I'd like to make sure that there's somebody on the board who represents that constituency.
Thank you, Daniel. That was wonderful. We just had our final candidate join us. That is Ben Coplan, who is running for the 3-year seat.
I'm sorry I'm late. I had some volunteer work that I had to finish up.
We understand.
But I also knew that when I give everybody else a chance to talk, because when I get going, I don't stop easily.
Well, you have 2 minutes to tell us why you're running for Select Board now, and I will cut you off at the end of 2 minutes.
That's a good thing. And when do you want me to start?
Right now.
Well, I've been in Brattleboro for 45 years. I came here from California because of a job that was offered to me. And I held that job for 17 years. And then management changed at the job, and I changed too, and I went to another job as an employment consultant, working with people with disabilities and helping them get jobs, and I was with them for 13 years. To get to the point as to why I am interested in serving the community and serving on the Select Board is that this town has been awfully good to me and my family members. And I want to see the town continue to be vibrant and to be actually more vibrant than what I see in the last couple of years. Things are stagnated somewhat, starting with hourly wages for people. We have more people of poverty in our town, more people with hunger, more people without affordable housing, and I have worked in all those areas, and I would like to see what I can do to help improve that condition of our town so it remains more vital.
Thank you, Ben. Perfect. I'm going to pose one more question to the candidates before I turn them over to talk to each other, because I just think it will give you more fodder. to ask questions of each other. And so my question is, and we'll start with Ben, since you're the newbie, just arrived. I'm wondering, what is one of the main issues facing Brattleboro that you feel the select board should be dealing with and isn't? And if you have any suggested solutions, that would be good too. And again, around 2 minutes.
One of the things I think the select board needs to be most conscious of is cutting costs that bears on taxpayers. Cutting our property tax, making sure that we invest what money that we do get into those things that are essential for good living for families, things that contribute to attracting individuals, families in particular, with children, to come to our community where we have jobs. I spent, as I said, 13 years helping people get jobs, and I was able to get over 100 jobs for people every year for 13 years. There are jobs, there still are. They just have to go about it in a way that realizes success. I think energy conservation and climate, anything that contributes to our climate problems are things that we need to take seriously and think of in the near term, not think that it's going to be something that actually affects people 20 years from now. It affects people now, and we need to be active. We own this climate, we own our town, and we're the only people who are going to do anything about it.
Thank you, Ben. And Elizabeth.
Well, I don't disagree with anything that Ben said. I think that one of the things that the select board, and I know Tim has been working on, is trying to get the state to recognize the issue of hub towns. And as an urban planner, I've been a town planner for 30 years, and so my environmental and land use planning work would be of use to the select board, because I understand that when there's towns like Brattleboro and Rutland and so forth that are under stress, it's not an issue with the surrounding towns as much as it is an issue that there are certain towns that are magnets for institutional uses that don't pay property taxes and so forth. So we need state aid to combat the high taxes that we pay and recognize these issues statewide. And I think that I can help with that issue. And I know the select board is working with that right now. And that really goes a long way to address the things that you said about high property taxes and crime and so forth. So I'm all for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Daniel, do you want to see if you can answer that question? Are you still with us?
I'll do my best. So two things that are really important to me right now are improving our transportation system within Brattleboro and also within Windham County, and making sure that there is a sufficient quantity of affordable housing for folks. I think that the town of Brattleboro can continue to partner with organizations that are already doing good work around housing, so keeping people housed, housing the homeless. I think that we can take a look at our human services budget and see whether or not the actual dollar amounts that we appropriate to human service organizations in the town actually line up with our professed values, and whether or not we're doing enough to support those organizations to do their good work. I would love to see Brattleboro have a bus service that can allow people to get to and from work easily, rather than not being able to get to a job, say, at the other end of Putney Road, or maybe even a job in Bellas Falls or Westminster. It's really challenging. And I think that no housing, no work, no transportation, no both also economic development issues. You know, if you don't have stable housing, it's hard to stay in a job. If you don't have access to transportation, it's hard to get to and from a job. So those things are really important for me.
Thank you, Daniel. Tim?
I think if I recall correctly, your question was about a little bit more like what haven't we dealt with that we should be dealing with? And we do on the select board deal with a lot of issues. But I did want to kind of agree with a part of what Daniel said and pick up on the housing issue. Now, we've been sort of batting it back and forth in the last few meetings about what to do to be a little more proactive on the select board about housing. And one of the ways I'd like to propose, if I'm re-elected in our next session, is to harness another part of our program income. We currently use program income, which is not taxpayer income directly, but it's a pool of money that we support businesses in with both low-cost loans and grants. We also do a very good apartments in homes program, which is related to housing, which is popular but underutilized. So I'd like to tap that program income again and come up with another program that would be focusing on people moving into town who need to renovate dilapidated housing. And this would provide grants with certain rules around it in order to make that leap to move into Brattleboro, invest in our town, but perhaps they're looking at a house that they love, has good bones, etc., but they need a little boost. And this would be a well-structured program that would allow them to go ahead and apply to the town. They do the work, they move in, they start paying taxes, most importantly, and then in return, the town gives them a grant to support that activity. So that's just one idea around the housing issue. And I think if anyone was watching the select board last night, we had a group of people, my friend Chad Simmons, currently
Hey, Tim, unfortunately your time's up.
Oh, gosh. All right. I'll leave that for the next comment period.
Well, and also people can go to BCTV and watch any of the select board meetings that they have filmed, so.
Thanks for keeping us.
So Oscar, what do you feel the select board should be focusing on and it's not?
So I think that a successful town is a delicate balancing act. You need to focus on the economy. You need to have money for your budget. Property taxes, if they're too high, there's a cost to that. People don't live here. On the other hand, I think having a human services budget is important. I think the town being involved with issues of homelessness and drug addiction are important, and it's something that we have to do. So I think there's no one policy that's going to solve all those problems. It's a balancing act, and it's about finding the right mix to make everything work. But to talk about a specific idea, which again doesn't address everything, but it's something I think the select board could pick up, is an idea that Dave Scholes mentioned at a recent select board meeting. It's the idea for a day jobs program in Brattleboro, which is very generally something where people who don't have work or don't have enough work could sign up and find short-term projects to work on through the town or through private businesses, where it might be something as simple as shoveling snow downtown or sweeping streets, or it might be something more involved with a business that could lead to longer-term employment. And this is an example of a kind of project that I really like because it ties in all the different strands. It's something that can make sense economically, it's something that can help the town. It's not just busy work, but it's also addressing some of these human problems in the community, and it gives people a chance to break out of sort of a bigger cycle of poverty, where if you have a job for a little while, maybe you start to have a little money, you start to make some connections with potential employers, and it gives you a way forward. And I think that could be really something really interesting to look at.
Thank you, Oscar. Right on time. Friends?
So something that the select board isn't working on.
That you believe it should.
That I believe it should. The problem is the select board's working on a lot of stuff. So many things that we could talk about that are important are in fact being addressed. One thing that's interesting to me about Brattleboro and that I don't really know the history of is how the town came to turn its back on the river. You know, you'd be downtown in Brattleboro, you wouldn't even know that the Connecticut River is right there with, you know, tremendous opportunities, certainly for recreation and having good experiences in town if you're from out of town. So there's a big opportunity coming up, I think, when the new Hindusdale Bridge is built to find ways to use the old bridge and the small islands out there, as well as other opportunities to promote the interaction between the people and the river, make it into a real asset, both in terms of pleasure and also business. I think that's something that the select board could look into as a development project.
Thank you. Ricky, what is one issue you feel the select board should be working on and isn't?
So as I'm listening to everyone beside me speak, I am trying to create a boundary to not internalize the lip service that's very fake and shallow of blue Democrats. They have a savior complex because they are all pro the sales tax, and that's going to be taking money away from the poorest people here, and it's going to detour tourism, and it's not going to help the economy here. It's not going to help the recession. It's not going to uplift people from the depression. And especially, I've had to resort to SEVCA several times in my life for help escaping violent situations I found myself in, which as a person on SSDI with about $11,000 income to survive on, I've taken advantage of pretty often. It's easy to exploit vulnerable people, especially financially vulnerable people. And so SEVCA, for when I applied to their help fund, they will not allow me to represent myself there. They will not give me the dignity I deserve to listen to me directly. Instead, they will only feel comfortable speaking to a case manager. They cannot tell my story about the situations I've been through and why I deserve housing security.
Just about 30 seconds left.
We don't need to rely on taxes or interest. We can have a matrix currency that's equal to US dollars and exchangeable for anything except nuclear bombs and nuclear weapons.
Thank you. Great responses, everyone. So I'm going to turn it to the candidates. Ricky, is there a question you want to put out to the candidates, either one individual or as a whole?
I don't want to go first.
Okay. Franz?
Well, I've already made public my suggestion that we get together for some doubles at the Brattleboro Tennis Club. So I'll go beyond that. Let's see. Well, yeah, I'd like to know Ben has already spoken to me about this, but who else would be willing to be on the town meeting finance committee if they are not on the select board?
I'm already on the finance committee with Franz, and the finance committee is really a great opportunity to study the budget, both the town budget and the school budget in depth, and interrogate the town manager. And I find it really useful, and it's one of those things where helps me prepare for the select board. But if I'm not elected, I would continue my service on the finance committee, and I would encourage other people to do as well, because it's a great way to really understand what the select board is up to. And I'm also a town meeting representative, and at town meeting, it's very helpful when you're voting to understand the budget thoroughly and read the report that we prepare.
Anyone else like to respond?
Sure. Yes, definitely. I'm very interested in doing that. The only question for me is if it will conflict with, I'm not sure, can you be on 2 town committees at once?
I believe so.
Let me tell you, you
Yeah,
can.
okay. As long as it doesn't conflict with staying on the energy committee, I will almost definitely do that if I'm on. I think it would be really interesting.
Fantastic. And Ricky, you said you'd be on it too?
Yeah.
So look, you have new recruits, Franz.
How about
Oscar.
Daniel?
It seems like you guys got enough volunteers.
That is so not true.
Oscar, any questions you'd like to pose to your fellow candidates?
That's a great question. I didn't have anything prepared.
I'd like to keep you.
Yeah, definitely. I see that. I guess my question, this is the thing that's been on my mind the most, is, and this is a big question, you don't have to give a big answer, but if you look ahead 30 years and picture Main Street in Brattleboro and the general economy in Brattleboro, what's a potential future you see? How could that Main Street look that is modern and vibrant in 30 years that probably isn't exactly the way it looks right now, but a potential future for Brattleboro's economy that you're excited about? And I know that's a lot to ask.
Well, why don't you answer it first, and then.
Oh, I see. That's a good technique. You go first, I'll go second.
Well, I'd like to see the Main Street be much more pedestrian oriented. I don't want to say no traffic at all, but certainly electric vehicles, electric scooters, access to vehicles while you're in town without having to necessarily bring your vehicle to town. I mean, I don't know, but you know, it's a nice Main Street. It's not as wide as it might be given our current transportation patterns. But I think if we modify our transportation patterns over town, the downtown Main Street area could, and other streets as well, could be a real pleasure to be on and just hang out when you're in town.
Anyone else want to jump on that?
I'll go second.
Okay.
Well, I could have prepared better for my own question, but I think you have to think about what kind of businesses. I think there's two paths. There's one path where Brattleboro doubles down as a tourist destination and makes itself more than, it is a tourist destination now, but in sort of a more transitory way than places like Stowe or Killington in Vermont. So focusing more on that path, that could be a future for the economy. And then you'd probably still see stores, a lot of restaurants. Another path would be trying to attract some new kind of business to town that's going to last for the 21st century. And for me, when I think about this, I think about 5, 10, 15 person technology businesses, small businesses that can work out of an office, and then every day at noon, all these packed offices go out onto Main Street, go into restaurants, go into shops. I think that could be a real engine for the economy. And the only other quick thing I want to mention is that we have to think about housing and we have to be realistic, and if we want to provide affordable housing, this is going to be a very unpopular idea to some people, but you have to start thinking 30 years down the line about, are we going to have a few more 3 or 4 story apartment buildings? Maybe not directly downtown, but near downtown. What kind of choices do we want to make if we really want economic development and we really want affordable housing and we really want to not price people out of the town and we want young people here? I think those are the kinds of choices we'll have to start looking at. What kinds of businesses, what kind of housing, and it may mean a little bit of a change from what we have now, but I think that's healthy. So,
Thank you, Oscar. I think Tim wants to respond to this too.
Yeah, and I think your question specifically was about Main Street, but I think I'd like to expand that a little bit. And, because Main Street, if you wanted to, a lot of people would love to see cars disappear from Main Street, but that's a huge ask and a lot of work. If you take a look at our Main Street, it's also important for the vibrancy of our downtown businesses, obviously.
Well, it also bumps into state and federal regulations as well.
Exactly, that's sort of what I meant by huge ask. But I'd like to concentrate, if we're thinking future wonderfulness, in what else already mentioned is the idea of being able to get at the river a little easier. I think Brattleboro turned its back historically because we were dumping all kinds of junk in the river and it started to smell. That's basically why we don't look at the river anymore. But now we should do that because the river is clean. And also an opportunity is the Whetstone Pathway opportunity that's coming up. I'm going to share, I keep saying I'm going to share, I haven't had a chance, this EPA document that our planners worked on with the possibilities of sending out a wonderful walkway starting at the co-op and going down the Whetstone River. So that walkway going down the river, which has another bunch of challenges because it's owned by the railroad, etc. So there's jurisdiction issues. But just coming out from Main Street, enjoying a non-automobile experience, and the bridge, as you mentioned, is going to be wonderful, and that's going to happen much sooner than 20 years from now. So it's going to be a great opportunity to come out and walk and bike and all kinds of things out from Main Street.
Thank you, Tim. Ben, or Elizabeth, sorry.
Well, as a town planner and chair of the planning commission, we are working on a number of these initiatives. What we're starting actually in our next month's meeting is work on the new downtown design plan. So we are currently planning for the future of the downtown in the planning commission. One of the things that, historically, the town planning, it's not just Brattleboro, but all towns and cities turn their back on the river. And for the last 25 years, I've been involved in Hudson River waterfront revitalization. One of the main challenges to opening up the Hudson River and the Connecticut River is pollution and railroads. And historically, railroads have always run along the river, and they're very challenging to get easements and to cross and even to do it. So that's an issue. But recently the town got a grant to create a waterfront park, and the new zoning, which was part of the planning commission's work, allowed for a new waterfront zone right there where the old bridge is, because not only do we have an opportunity with the new bridge, but we have an opportunity with what to the old bridge. So it's a very interesting time for us to, understand how new businesses come. My husband and I moved here 12 years ago. We each started our own businesses. I think, Oscar, we're all examples of really a new economy where people come with their laptops and either work remotely from their corporate office or start a new business. So certainly that's all part of the mix. And we have right now an opportunity to begin to plan what our downtown looks like, what these old and new bridges do, and I believe in more of an incremental planning process, because we had a pie-in-the-sky plan for the Putney Road master plan, but that assumed a huge amount of investment
Elizabeth?
that we're never going to have.
Thank you. Ben?
One of the things that I've been told by a number of groups of people, both merchants who own businesses and also shoppers who like to contribute to the businesses by shopping, and also particularly by elderly people and those with disabilities, we need more parking. And what I don't know is to what degree the parking garage is fully utilized. And by whom, what is it best? Because parking in easy to get places that's easy to get to businesses is very, very difficult. And it's to the point where the parking is reserved for individuals, for instance, at the senior center, in the back of the senior center, is taken up by shoppers who do not have a permit to park there. And there is also no control of that. They leave little paper notices underneath the windshield wiper that says, I'm sorry, you're not supposed to park there unless you have a senior citizen and senior center permit, but they don't have the authority, and the police do not have the time to drag the total vehicles out. But people are using that area because there's no place on the streets for park. And if there's not enough places on the streets to park, that means it's a controlling factor to the number of people who are wanting and needing access to local businesses, which affects the economy. I've also not been terribly happy with the way of our maintenance of our streets and roads in terms of potholes. You've probably encountered them as well, but what I've noticed mostly is not just, this time, we live in a...
Hey, Ben.
Okay. All right.
Wonderful thoughts, thank you. Sorry to cut you off.
And
Ricky, did you want to respond to the question?
So with a currency matrix, we wouldn't have to keep on prioritizing taxpayers' concerns, and we could focus more on local commerce. I don't pay taxes when I file my taxes because I don't make enough income to pay. And so I want people to really reflect on when they say that they care so much about taxpayers, who you are excluding, and that those people you're excluding do participate and contribute to local commerce. And I would ask everyone here how they support ethnic committees with the NAACP, the National Advancement of People of Color, and the NAAAP, the National Advancement for Asian Peoples, or with Asian peoples. And since none of you represent those ethnicities, as far as I am aware, and I can be ignorant of, how are you going to do that without a savior complex? And how are you going to promote fair voting? And as part of a future vision for the urban developing, there needs to be bike lanes to protect people's safety from car accidents, and to not make the mistakes of other very urbanized areas that are surrounding their trees with cement. We really need to protect our trees and consider them sacred, because there is a lot of smog downtown, and I know we have mountains full of trees over there, but having relationships with the trees in our town is very important.
Thank you. And Daniel?
Thanks. It's easy to be forgotten about when you're disembodied. So, yeah, thinking about 30 years in the future, there's part of me that goes to a kind of negative place. If we continue with 30 years of inaction on climate change, then 30 years in the future we're going to really need to make sure that there are places downtown in Brattleboro for folks to go to get out of extremely warm days. Already in recent years we've seen the library and I'm presuming also the senior center used as cooling stations. So having that kind of public space available for folks downtown, I think, is really important. Unless you're spending a few dollars, there aren't actually that many places downtown where you can hang out. Pliny Park is fine, but it's mostly concrete. The library is a wonderful resource, and I think the Star at the library has done a really great job in moving it forward. But I would love to see more green spaces, more open spaces. I'd like to see fewer cars, quieter, cleaner air, more bike parking available, some protected bike lanes would be really wonderful. I think that we have a really great small downtown, and I would like for the businesses there to be useful to the people that live in our town. I can't, legislate which businesses come or not, but I think that we already have a lovely walkable downtown, and we should do more to kind of make it accessible to all. I know that certainly accessibility is an issue for an aging population, and especially during this time with snow removal, it can be hard to get around for folks.
Thank you, Daniel. So we're a little bit of time-wise, we're at a bit of a crossroads. We have about 15 minutes left before 1 o'clock, when I know that we had planned to end. So I can leave it up to the audience and the candidates. Do we want to open it up to audience questions, or do candidates still? Okay. I was kind of hoping that would be the answer, but you know. Who would like to? Thank you. So please stand up and, for the benefit of the candidates in the TV, speak loudly.
All right, I hope you can all hear me. My concern is about 5G, and if you're not aware of 5G, you can pass and not speak about it, but if you are aware of it, it's in the Vermont Telecommunications 10-year plan. It's included in the verbiage to be rolled out in our state, even though all the representatives are kind of saying, no, it's not. No, don't worry about it in Vermont. Well, it's not true. We need to be concerned about it. Now, my question is, if you're aware of it and want to make a comment, how would you protect Brattleboro from the 5G rollout in my neighborhood or our neighborhoods?
So I just want to clarify your question. You're concerned about 5G coming to the area.
Yes.
It's something you prefer not to see.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants to go first? Otherwise, I'm going to start with Ben.
No, and I don't know enough about 5G to comment. I
Okay.
would like to learn more.
Elizabeth?
The only knowledge I have of it is from talking to Laura Sedelia. She's the representative who really focuses on telecommunications, and she spoke to the Wyndham Regional Commission, and I'm a commissioner. She would be the resource that I would discuss that with.
Tim?
I'd like to first say that I don't think the Select Board is going to have any role in whether or not 5G rolls out, when it rolls out, etc. It's just not within our purview, I'm afraid. But I will also say that I have looked into 5G because I've been being on the Select Board, I've been sent a few concerning emails, and I've actually looked into it, and I call myself an evidence-based, a science-based Select Board member, and I do not have concerns about public health and 5G. I don't believe the science supports the concerns that a lot of people have.
Oscar?
Do we want Daniel or?
Oh, yes, Daniel. So sorry, I did it to you again.
Sorry, Daniel, you're very small.
I'm coming to you from a wireless carrier right now. I don't feel like I know enough about this to comment substantively. I would say that, like Tim, I would want to, really follow the science on this. I was at a meeting with Molly Bird and Emily Kornheiser a couple of weeks back, and this question was raised to them, and their response was, this rollout's not happening in Vermont. I trust Molly, I trust Emily. I believe that they were telling me the truth, and I believe that if the situation changes, that it's something to take a look at.
Can we just clarify for everyone to indicate that 5G is about net neutrality and Vermont having our own internet provider for everyone?
That's not what it is.
All right, tell me what it is.
Thank you. Only.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Thank you.
5G is microwave antennae being placed throughout our right-of-ways. These microwave antennae go up to 100 gigahertz. That's the plan. Right now, 4G goes up to 6 gigahertz. So it's an exponential leap. Nationwide and worldwide, 5G has been rolled out already before being tested for safety. Studies, there are literally thousands of studies based on the bioelectric model of the human body. And bioelectric model of the human body has been around for 20 years. It's not something that the FCC has relied on. And at least 7 mechanisms within the human body have been shown in these studies to account for the psychiatric suffering and the physical suffering and the cognitive suffering that happens in the wake of microwave frequencies. 5G is, the G stands for generation. So whenever we have a big change in our telecommunications, it's called the next generation, like 3G, 4G, 5G. And so 5G is the 5th generation in the technology.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, so why is this wave being sent out? Is it for everyone to have internet?
No. The wave is sent out. Wave would carry far more information and be able to upload far more information faster, which the average user has no need for. And the wave technology is used also by the military for crowd control across the world. And doctors and pediatricians, teachers, electrical engineers, workers who work on all the utility poles, firefighters, nationwide and worldwide, if you Google that,
Or DuckDuckGo.
are saying that this is not safe and they want it out.
What do you
They
do
don't-
for
They
work?
do not want it to roll out.
What do you do for work?
Me?
Yeah.
I am a PhD in psychology and I develop holistic wellness programs.
Thank you for that. I want to turn it back to the candidates in the interest of time. Oscar, have you had a chance to
I haven't
respond?
gone yet, and I've now benefited from a nice description of it. My position is pretty simple, that if the science says that it's dangerous, then I'm opposed to it. And if the science says that it's not dangerous, then I'll follow that too. And there are benefits to faster internet, even beyond speeds we have now. But you know, if there are well-supported health concerns, then I'm opposed to it. But I haven't looked at the science myself, so I'd have to do that first.
Thank you. Franz?
I guess I should say that I am a physician. I have a master's degree in public health that I got before I went to medical school. And I did look into this question recently, not in great detail or great length, but I was unable to find actual convincing evidence. There's a lot of questions that are raised, but I didn't see convincing evidence with what I thought would be valid, reliable research methods that showed any clear-cut health risk. Now, it's very hard to set lower boundaries on exposure to various types of radiation, etc. And you can certainly find experts who say there is no safe level of radiation exposure. Now, it gets quite a bit more complicated because we're not talking about ionizing radiation, we're talking about non-ionizing radiation, which does not have a thermal effect on tissues. So just exactly what you should measure and what its effects are not easy things to determine, but I'd say as of right now, I haven't seen the evidence that makes me worry about a substantial health effect. I think this is something that will be talked about a lot more, but as of right now, I think my position is I'm waiting to see the evidence that would convince me that the 5G is a danger.
Thank you. Ricky?
I refuse to be experimented on to supply that evidence towards other people, as I've already experimented on enough in many ways through different medications that Medicare has approved and that Medicaid won't approve. And I don't want to be a guinea pig. I pity anyone else who is used as a guinea pig against their awareness or will or consent. And I am aware that part of the bee extinction is part of in response to radio waves. And we completely depend on bees for pollinating our food. And any risk like this is not worthwhile, and we just need to invest in safer technology that we can trust.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. You told me earlier you had a question. Has it been asked? Or?
Yeah, I did have I had a question. Yes, thank
Yes.
you. So this is such a challenging time, as you pointed out, and we're all facing such controversial issues and some very real anxiety about our 30-year future. And the issues go beyond what the usual important issues are, right? I mean, these are catastrophic possibilities that we're facing together. And so there's so much learning that has to happen, and listening to different points of view, and cutting through lobbyists and control of information. How do we do that together? So my question to you at this pivotal juncture in our future is, how do you imagine yourself learning on the job about all these and cutting through the lobbyists and the fictions to get at the truth, and hearing from different points of view in town to really look to learn? Yeah.
Oscar, you look like you want to go.
Oh, I was just seeing what you were going to do.
Your person.
Yeah, let's start in the middle this time.
Well, my philosophy, I think that this being such a local level of government makes this easier in some ways for me. And my answer to your question is that it's the select board's job during the campaign, after the campaign, not just to meet twice a month or 4 times a month, and not just to do research, but to actively be out talking to people, soliciting different opinions. The number of conversations I've had in the last month alone, the amount of new information I've gotten has been really eye-opening and really inspiring. It helps me think of new things I wouldn't have otherwise. There have been questions I've been wondering about that it turns out, not surprisingly, but people have been coming up with ideas for these things for decades in this town. There's a lot of really great old ideas that were never implemented. That I think this is an opportunity for sort of absolute democracy. You can almost talk, if you really put in the effort, and I haven't been able to do it in these last couple weeks, but 1,100 people voted in last year's select board meetings. That is a number of people that you could talk to in a year. And I think, that's why I'm involved. That's my goal, if I'm elected, is to keep my ears open and make the active effort to talk to people as much as I can, read as many studies as I can, talk to the experts. I think that's really the only thing we can do.
Thank you, Oscar. Before I go on to the other candidates, I want to do a time check. I have a feeling there's one more question in the audience. And Russ, if you stayed for like 15 minutes over 1, is that okay?
As long as everybody, when you're done, fold up your chair and put it on the rack, we really appreciate it.
We can do that.
Thank you.
We can do that. Thank you. Let's head down to Tim, if you want to respond to this question.
Oh, sure. From a sitting on the select board perspective, I'll say that it's really important when you're up there to be able to spend your time wisely. And a lot of information comes at you, and a lot of concerns come at you. And so I feel I spend a good amount of energy figuring out what's really important, what we have some control over, because if you spend time worrying about things you don't have control over, you're literally wasting the public's time and money. And what we do have some control over. So just in the past few months, I've been pushing very hard for this new rental inspection program here in Brattleboro. I feel it's very important. I feel it just bumps up what we already have in a very limited capacity. It allows the town to inspect properties on a reasonable basis every 4 years at a very limited cost to landlords. And I'm a landlord too, and I welcome the program because it comes out to $1.56 a month per unit. And that to me is a very real fear that I have, is that somebody who is low income and doesn't have control over their housing situation is going to be in an unsafe housing situation. That is within the select board's purview and very much a real fear that we should be addressing. No offense, but 5G I'm not concerned because I'm evidence-based and I don't believe the science supports problems. And if
This is evidence-based research as
I
well.
understand, but I'll just throw it out there. If you're concerned about 5G and you think that we have some say over it, don't vote for me, because I am not going to support worries about 5G. I fully support you not voting for me. Okay.
How about Daniel, so I don't forget him this time?
Thanks. I've been enjoying hanging out with you during my lunch break. I'm going to have to go after this question, so I'll keep it real brief. And I can't even remember what the question was now. I was so distracted by that interesting exchange there. Remind me, I'll get the question.
The question was, how can we talk to each other and how can the select board get through to the facts?
Yeah.
And lobbying.
Keeping an open mind, being in touch with people who are intimately involved in the goings-on of the town, right? So like, I met with Steve Barrett the other week, I met with Sue Fillion, learning about what they do day in, day out. You know, the select board gets together every couple of weeks. I'm sure that there's work outside of that, but there are town staff that are working on things every single day, and they are the experts in their respective domains. And learning from them about how things work, and what the problems are, thinking about what some solutions might be, and asking questions is the, being curious is the pathway to learning new stuff, so that's what I would do. I gotta go, I've got work to do. Thank you for spending some time. Thanks to the rivergarden. Thanks, Olga.
Thanks, Daniel. Have a great rest of your workday.
Be my technical.
Elizabeth, is that a question?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting question. I don't know. Well, my experience on the finance committee would be a good example because we're wrestling with what to do about the 1%. We talk to proponents of the 1% and we talk to opponents of the 1% and we've read academic studies and we're asking questions and, we're wrestling with that. I don't know that I've encountered any lobbyists. And on the skate park committee, we're focused on really surmounting the obstacles that the skate park has suffered through for years. There was opposition, not so much lobbyists. And I get to see, the various departments that work. The park and rec department does a fine job, and the planning department I know well. So I see how town government works, and I understand how to keep abreast of all the situations. And hopefully lobbyists won't come to town.
Ben, thank you, Elizabeth.
I'm going to suggest and invite you all to come to town meeting on the 23rd at the high school, because there'll be much more discussion about various issues of the town, and people who are not town meeting reps and not elected as town meeting reps tend not to go. But you are welcome, and you can speak, and you can bring forth issues about the town as it affects you and your family and your neighbors that may not be spoken of by anybody else there. As a matter of fact, the skateboard issue is a good example of how I didn't vote for it, what was promoted at the town meeting. I am a town meeting rep, but I think the skateboard committee was benefited tremendously through the town meeting last year.
Did, because
They made a lot of money
Yeah.
that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and there was a broad base of people who voted for it. So I would hope that you would come to town meeting. It's unique in the political system that we have, where it's not just the select board. Well, I'm suggesting I'd like to be on the select board, but we have another depth in this town, and we're lucky, and we'd like to have your involvement.
Thank you, Ben. Ricky, would you like to respond?
First, So like I said earlier, I reiterate that if these were paid positions, then we could really dedicate more of ourselves to the work that's involved in it, and the best people would apply then instead of corporations that would be trying to lobby to us. And most of the lobbyists that have made themselves extremely present at these meetings are, I don't want to call it landowners, but land thieves, because this is really indigenous land that we're on, and we can't really own that. But the land thieves that are earning over $55,000 net income are really present here at the meetings, talking about how much they want everyone else to pay taxes that make less income than them. And another way we could, speaking about transparency and lobbying, is to make all of the candidates' income resources available to the public as well, and to see like who is funding them. Because I keep on hearing Ben Coplan say that the town has been so generous to him, has been so kind to him, and so I see a favoritism towards his family then. And although I'm so grateful for the mercy I've been spared to have what little I do have, and I have not particularly been favored in such a generous way.
Thank you, Ricky.
I think that's important for voters to know and consider.
Okay, I'll answer in a second. Ricky, I just want to say that Ben is way too much of a gentleman to defend himself from any type of attack, but Ben has been an important person in this community for a long time.
Everyone is important.
I don't think anybody has showed Ben's family favoritism in any
When he
way.
says continuously that the town has been generous to him.
Yes.
It's a
Well,
wonderful perspective, isn't it?
I don't want to spend any further time on this, but I just want to say that I would stand up for Ben's role in the town and what he has received.
Will you stand up for other people too?
Yes, I certainly will.
Good.
So I started off this session by saying that one of my hopes is to get more people involved in town affairs and town government, and so that certainly is one way of approaching problem solving. And I also want to say that at the select board meeting last night, I said that there's nothing like running for the select board to help you understand how little you know about town affairs and what's going on. It came up last night in the setting of recycling and the plastic bag ordinance and stuff like that, but it made me realize that, hey, I really don't know what happens to the stuff that I recycle so carefully every week. And it's it's a big issue not only nationally but internationally of what happens to the stuff that we throw away. So anyway, I'm quite devoted to finding answers to things, and I think there's a lot of ways to do it. But as Daniel said, the number one way is by asking questions and being curious.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
I don't know if this is a question people can answer in the last 5 minutes, but what I'm thinking about is people have been talking about the cost of housing in Brattleboro, and it seems to me that the problem is that not just that housing is really expensive, but that wages are pretty low. Wyndham County has one of the lowest wages, average wages in Vermont. Or, no, I shouldn't say that. Biggest gap between wages and the cost of housing in Wyndham County is, it's one of the counties with the biggest gap. And so several of you were talking about like encouraging entrepreneurs to come into Brattleboro or coming in and having, starting businesses, but that's actually not how most people here make a living. And so my question is really, what do you see the role of the select board in trying to decrease that gap so that more people are actually able to afford housing in Brattleboro? So not just the lowering the cost of housing or making more affordable housing available, but also like bringing in the kind of jobs that would pay wages that would enable people to actually keep a roof over their head and food on the table and so forth.
Very crucial question for Vermont as a whole. I see Tim wants to jump on it, but I'm going to start with Ben.
Well, I'm in favor of a $50 minimum. And I know the places where we've had $50 an hour minimum wage, it has been beneficial, and it has not caused employers to have fewer employees. and it's not caused them to make less money necessarily. It's been good, and I think Seattle is a wonderful example of where that's been instituted, and they have good research to show that it helps people be able to afford housing, which it doesn't affect the housing prices necessarily, but it just helps people be able to afford it somewhat better. I've been involved in affordable housing, as some people know, for a long, long time, and I've also represented a lot of individuals that are on Social Security disability benefits, who don't have very much money and who are struggling. And for them, I really don't know how they can possibly live in this town without extra help.
Thank
It's,
you. Thank you.
I'm fortunate I don't have that issue, and my family members as well.
Elizabeth.
Well, I know the Windham County delegation, our state representatives and 2 state senators are in favor of the $15 minimum wage. They passed it last session. The governor vetoed it, I believe, and I think we have a much better shot this year of it passing and being signed into law. So at the select board, I think we can work closely with our state representatives, not only on this initiative, but on a variety of initiatives to help the people of Brattleboro and the people of Windham.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Tim.
We don't have control over minimum wages. It is something that has to happen on the state level, but Elizabeth's absolutely right, and Ben, that we can advocate for it, and that's really important, I think. But more, what we do have control over, and we are able to talk about behind closed doors, a lot of discussions happen about bringing in companies to Brattleboro. And you saw the result of that more recently publicly, because we have a new company called Culture Made Vermont coming into town, and it's going to provide good paying jobs. These are not minimum wage jobs. These are, I think a few are mixed in, but these are good paying jobs in the middle range, I guess you might call it. And that, along with projects like Commonwealth Dairy came in, and a lot of behind the scenes working happens at the select board level to entice, to discuss the advantages of a company moving in. And then we move out into the public. Once we have been able to make a connection, we then discuss with the public, is it appropriate that we give a tax incentive to a company to come here? A lot of people are opposed to it. We've struggled with it a lot. We brought it to the public, and we decided that in the case of Culture Made Vermont, a limited tax incentive was very appropriate, and we need these jobs. So when you join the select board, you lend your voice to these decisions.
When you say limited, how much?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. It's a tax stabilization agreement that's pretty standard and conservative in a good way for the taxpayers, because we never want to get into a situation where we're just giving tax money away,
Right.
because that's all of our money.
And is there a commitment for like how long they stay, or is there something on the other end?
Oh, yes, yeah, there's sunset clauses for the stabilization. There's a commitment that they have to pay it back even if they leave the area.
Thank you, Tim. Oscar.
Well, this question isn't, or wasn't specifically about the $15 minimum wage, but I think I like to look one step larger at, for a town's economy to be successful, it has to have a core, it has to have an engine, and everything else, to some degree, will be driven by that. This actually comes from a conversation I had with McLoughlin in the back there, about the core of an economy, and you need a reason for people to come, for people to live there, for people to work in your town. And if you don't have that core, if you set the minimum wage to $15, it doesn't matter what the minimum wage is if nobody shops at your store, because your store can't exist. So I think a $15 minimum wage in a healthy or diversified economy like a big city like Seattle makes a lot of sense, and I can understand why they'd see a lot of benefits. I think for a town that's already worried about the 1% sales tax, the cost of a $15 minimum wage would be a similarly, probably more so, big financial question for employers. And I think until you have that engine, you are much more vulnerable to businesses seeing higher costs and not being able to function. If you live, for example, somewhere like Cambridge, which has a number of big universities that are going to pull people to that region, no question, then you have a really solid foundation for restaurants, for tourism, for general stores, for hardware stores, for everything, because you know people are going to come. If you don't have that core, you're building on a really fragile foundation. And a lot of the stuff, if you don't have that core, I just think a lot of those other things aren't addressing the real problem. They are, they're not what make the economy function. So it's a really big question, way more than a 2-minute answer. I would love to talk to you about it outside this, but I think it's really complicated.
Except your time's up. So now I can't turn it off. Sorry about that, everyone. Franz.
Oscar, are you saying that economic development sometimes involves difficult choices and can be a complicated balancing act?
No.
And thank you for telling us that we didn't know.
I actually have all the answers. I'll reveal them later.
If you're like,
I alone can fix it, right?
I pulled the secret plan trick at the last meeting. You can't pull it out now. Difficult question, complicated balancing act, regional solutions rather than town by town, I think, for sure. Gradual increases in minimum wage, I don't think it should be done in all in one jump. And taking into account various points of view, talking to people, asking questions.
Thank you. Ricky.
So I believe the public deserves more than just lending their voice, but actual direct democracy to vote, have a majority vote on all of these changes, so that you don't have representatives who are saying that they're speaking for you, because they're really only speaking from their own experience in the end of it, and that will also be another way to prevent lobbying. And I think our job is just to try to learn as much and then have a forum to discuss the issue publicly, mostly for people's entertainment and also educationally, but like really we need to trust people to decide for themselves what they want and create the future that they want, because we aren't doing any of the work ourselves of actually implementing any of the things we're voting on up here. And we need more than a $15 minimum wage, like 25, but a $25 minimum wage is a start, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is security, and that's going to come from a basic income, because working is a privilege. Not everyone is able to work. And people in crisis, no matter what their minimum wage is, they deserve a security beyond a job. Because that job, saying we need jobs, we don't need enslavement. We need emancipation from that mindset. We really need to table any tax increase for at least 5 to 10 years. It's a waste of time to talk about. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It is 1:19. We've gone over time. So quickly, candidates, if people have more questions or they had questions that they just weren't comfortable asking, how do they get in touch with you?
Telephone, Facebook?
Yeah,
Stop me on the street, I don't know.
Do you have an email you can give out? Is there a Facebook, do you have Facebook pages?
yeah, well, rather than us all yelling it out, should we just touch base with each one, or should we just, I'm T. Wessel at brattleboro.org.
Okay.
I have a phone number, 802-380-8433.
Thank you.
Myself.
Elizabeth?
McLoughlin.elizabeth.s@gmail.com, and have these handy dandy big flyers that outline.
Ben, how should people reach you?
And I have flyers here with my phone and my email address. I don't have a Facebook account, but you can contact me.
You liked my page on Facebook.
See, part of this is for the people who are watching on BCTV too.
Speak up.
Oh, I have Facebook and Instagram.
Ben, what was yours?
Well, my email address is bencoplan21 franzreichman@gmail.com. And my telephone number is 579-6630. I welcome your contacts, your calls.
Oscar.
My email is oheller, OHELLER, @protonmail.com, and my phone number is 802-380-6847, and yeah, please reach out anytime.
Email is franzreichman@gmail.com. My phone number is 802-257-7217. My Facebook page is Franz's Selectboard page, and you can reach me through there or on instant messenger.
So I have been in email contact with, well, I sent out email contact to everyone on present here, and the only people that have contacted me back are Ben and Franz, and I appreciate that because so many other people just consider me as annoying spam, and I really appreciate the validation of talking back with me even though I may not agree with you. And all of our contact information is on the town website as well. I also use Proton Mail. They're great because they do not do any ad tracking, and you can do encrypted messages with them as well. And I have a Facebook page, and I have an interview available online with Political Bank and Brattleboro.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to our candidates.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're making a great job.
Yeah, no, yeah, please do. Please do. I just, it hasn't even.
But, I love that, I wanted to say something about